The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of species sat in their designated sections, their voices creating a constant hum that echoed off the crystal walls. Captain Laura stood at the central platform, her simple blue uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by most other delegates. She held a small data device in her hand, and her face showed no emotion as she waited for silence. Beside her, Counselor Myra Santos watched the crowd with careful eyes. She had spent 20 years studying alien psychology, and she could read the room better than most. Fear hung in the air like smoke. Every species present knew why they had gathered, and most of them wished they were somewhere else. The High Arbiter, an elderly being from the peaceful race, raised one of his four arms, and the hall fell silent. His pale blue skin seemed to glow under the lights as he spoke in the common trade language. Captain of the Human Confederacy has requested to address this council regarding the recent actions of the Dominion. She may speak. Laura stepped forward and activated her data device. Holographic images appeared above her head, showing burned cities, mass graves, and endless lines of chained prisoners being marched onto transport ships. 3 months ago, the Dominion invaded she began, her voice steady and clear. They were a peaceful species. They had no military. They posed no threat to anyone. Within 6 days, they had killed 40% of their population and enslaved the rest. They is now a mining colony, and the people exist only to dig ore until they die. She changed the image to show another world, this one covered in dense forests that were now burning. 2 months ago, they attacked They tried to surrender on the first day. They killed their leaders anyway, then spent 3 weeks hunting the survivors through the forests for sport. They called it training for their young warriors. More images followed, more dead worlds, more enslaved peoples, more atrocities that made even the most hardened delegates look away. The Dominion has conquered 17 species in the past 50 years, Laura continued. Not one of those species chose war. Not one of them posed any threat. They were simply weak enough to be taken, and that was reason enough for She turned to face the section where the delegation sat. They were large beings, reptilian in appearance, with scales that ranged from dark green to black. Their eyes reflected the light like polished stones, and their teeth were visible even when their mouths were closed. At their center sat Ambassador Al, the most powerful in the Dominion after the Supreme Predator himself. "I am asking this council to impose sanctions on the Dominion," Laura said. "Trade restrictions, travel bans, and the creation of protected zones around vulnerable species. We must send a message that conquest and slavery will not be tolerated." For a moment there was silence, then Al began to laugh. It was not a pleasant sound. It rumbled from deep in his chest and filled the hall like thunder. Others joined in, their laughter mixing together until it seemed to shake the very walls. Laura stood perfectly still, waiting. Finally, Al rose from his seat. He was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, and his ceremonial armor was decorated with the bones of fallen enemies. "This," he said, gesturing at Laura with one clawed hand, "is what passes for a galactic power now. This small, soft creature comes before us to cry about the weak, to beg us to stop doing what every strong species has done since the beginning of time." He walked down toward the central platform, his heavy footsteps echoing through the hall. The delegates from other species pressed back in their seats as he passed. "Let me explain something to you, human," Al said, stopping just a few feet from Laura. He towered over her, but she did not step back. "The universe has one law: the strong take from the weak. This is not cruelty. This is nature. This is truth. They were weak, so they serve us now. They were weak, so they died. This is as it should be." "And what of compassion?" Laura asked quietly. "What of mercy?" Al's laughter returned, harsher than before. "Compassion," he repeated, as if tasting something rotten. "Mercy, these are the words of prey animals. These are the lies the weak tell themselves to feel better about their weakness. You humans are famous for your compassion. You rescue the helpless. You feed the hungry. You treat your enemies with kindness." He leaned closer, his breath hot on Laura's face. "And this is why your species will fail. Compassion is a flaw. Mercy is a disease. They make you weak, and the weak do not survive." Laura met his eyes without flinching. "You are certain of this?" "I have never been more certain of anything," Al replied. "Within 100 years, humans will either kneel before the Dominion or cease to exist. Your compassion will be your extinction." He turned and walked back toward his delegation, then stopped and looked over his shoulder. We will not agree to any sanctions, and if this council tries to stop us, we will treat them as we treated the fear nothing and no one. The vote that followed was close, but in the end, the council could not agree on action. Too many species were afraid of retaliation. Too many preferred to hope the predators would be satisfied with easier prey. As the delegates filed out of the hall, Myra Santos moved close to Laura. "That could have gone better," Myra said quietly. Laura watched Al's retreating form, her expression thoughtful. "Actually," she said, "I think it went exactly as it needed to. They have made a mistake today. They have told the entire galaxy that they understand only strength, and they have announced that they see compassion as weakness." "How is that a mistake?" Laura finally allowed herself a small smile. "Because they are wrong, and because they are too arrogant to realize it until it is far too late. Compassion is not weakness, Myra. It is a strength they cannot even imagine, and one day soon they will learn that lesson." She turned and walked out of the hall, leaving Myra to wonder what the captain saw that no one else could see. Far across the galaxy, warships were already preparing for their next conquest. They did not know that they had just set in motion the events that would lead to their complete destruction. They did not know that the small, soft humans they had mocked would be the architects of their doom. They knew only strength, and so they could not understand that their greatest weakness was their inability to see strength in anything else. 6 months had passed since the council meeting, and they had grown bolder with each passing week. Their raiding parties struck human border colonies without warning, burning settlements and taking prisoners before the defense forces could respond. Admiral Peter Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched another distress signal fade to static. Another colony gone. Another 1,000 humans in chains. His executive officer, Commander Daniel Hayes, approached with a tablet showing casualty reports. "The council is demanding a response, Admiral. The senators want to know why we have not launched a counterattack." Peter took the tablet but did not look at it. His eyes remained fixed on the star map, where red markers showed every incursion over the past 6 months. There were dozens of them now, scattered across the border like drops of blood. "Tell the council that we are responding," Peter said, "just not in the way they expect." On the surface, it appeared that humanity was losing. The attacked and the humans retreated. The burned colonies and the humans evacuated survivors. The took territory and the humans fell back to new defensive lines. Every military analyst in the galaxy was predicting that the human confederacy would collapse within 2 years. But Peter Cole knew something the analysts did not know. Every retreat was calculated. Every evacuation saved not just lives but information. And every survivor who escaped brought stories, data, and knowledge that was slowly building into something they could never understand. 300 light-years away, Doctor sat in a research facility surrounded by screens showing biological and cultural data. She had been studying the Dominion for 5 years, and she had finally found what she was looking for. "They have no word for cooperation," she said to her assistant, a young man named Park. "Not a single word in any language that means working together as equals. They have words for command, submission, domination, and service, but nothing that describes two beings helping each other without one controlling the other." Looked up from his own research. How is that possible? How does a species build an interstellar civilization without cooperation? "They use slavery and fear," explained. "Every relationship is about power. The strong give orders, the weak obey. There is no middle ground, and because of this they cannot even imagine that other species might work together as genuine partners." She pulled up a report from the refugee centers that humanity had established across Allied space. "This is why they keep losing information to us. When a ship is damaged, the other ships do not stop to help. They leave their wounded behind because stopping would show weakness. But when we rescue survivors from conquered species, those survivors are grateful. They share everything they know, and they want to help us fight." The refugee camps had become something unexpected. They were not just shelters, but gathering places for knowledge and anger. Species that had been conquered by for generations were meeting each other for the first time, sharing their histories and their hatred for their oppressors. Among them was a young woman named. Her people had been nearly wiped out 50 years ago, reduced from billions to barely 100,000 survivors scattered across labor camps. She had escaped 6 months ago when a human rescue ship had appeared over the mining world where she had been born into slavery. The humans had asked nothing from her. They had given her food, medicine, and a safe place to live. They had helped her find other survivors. And when she had asked why they were doing this, a human doctor had simply said, "Because you needed help." Had never heard those words before. In the Dominion, help was always a transaction. You gave something to get something. The idea that beings would help strangers simply because they were suffering was so foreign to her that she had spent weeks waiting for the humans to reveal their true demands. They never did. Now worked as an advisor to the human military, sharing everything she knew about tactics, weaknesses, and internal politics. She was not alone. Survivors from dozens of conquered species were doing the same thing, providing intelligence that no amount of spying could have gathered. Captain Laura visited the refugee center on station once a month. She had been promoted to a diplomatic position after the council meeting, tasked with building relationships with the species that humanity was rescuing. It was slow work, but it was working. They have agreed to share their knowledge of shield technology, reported during one visit. The survivors have provided complete maps of supply lines, and the resistance has made contact. They are ready to rise up when the time comes. Laura nodded, making notes on her tablet. And what do they want in return? Paused. This question always confused her. They want them to be stopped. They want their people to be free. That is all. No territory, no resources, no guarantees of power after the war. No, said slowly. They trust you. You helped them when you did not have to. You asked nothing in return. They believe you will do what is right. Laura smiled, and there was something sad in her expression. They would never understand this, she said. They think we are wasting resources on refugees. They think compassion makes us weak. They do not realize that every person we save becomes an ally. Every act of kindness builds a bond stronger than any chain. Far across the border, Ambassador Al received reports of the human refugee operations and laughed. They waste ships and supplies rescuing worthless slaves, he told his commanders. While we build our forces for the true invasion, the humans grow weaker with every passing day. He ordered the main fleet to begin mobilizing. 200 warships, the largest force ever assembled, would strike at the heart of human space. He expected the humans to fight briefly and then beg for mercy. He expected them to offer surrender in exchange for their lives. He expected wrong. Admiral Peter Cole received intelligence about the mobilization 3 days before they launched. His sources were former slaves who had been rescued by human ships and who maintained contact with resistance cells inside space. They had no such intelligence network. They had never treated anyone with enough kindness to earn such loyalty. Peter looked at the star map and chose the battlefield. The Meridian System, a human colony world with strong defenses and room for maneuvering. He sent messages to every allied species that had pledged support. The replies came within hours. 12 species, some of them with only a handful of ships, all agreed to stand with humanity, not because they were forced to, not because they feared punishment for refusing, but because humans had helped them when no one else would, and now they wanted to return the favor. Was on the bridge of a cruiser, one of only 6 ships her people had managed to build in secret. The ship was old and poorly armed. It would not survive long in a direct fight. But her crew were there anyway. They saved us, she told her crew. Now we save them. This is what it means to be free. The fleet entered Meridian space expecting easy prey. They found something else entirely. They found hope. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Meridian system. 200 warships arranged in the classic Predator formation that had crushed 17 species before. War Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devourer, and studied the tactical display with hungry eyes. This would be his greatest victory. The humans would fall, and they would feast on their worlds for generations. Then the display updated, and felt something he had not felt in 50 years of war. Confusion. The human fleet was there just as expected. 60 ships arranged in defensive positions around the colony world. But they were not alone. Surrounding them, filling the space between the planets, were ships from a dozen different species. Cruisers, destroyers, gunships, medical vessels. Ships from species that they had conquered, ships from species that they had never even threatened. All of them flying in formation with the humans. What is this? Demanded. Why are they here? His tactical officer checked the readings 3 times before answering. Unknown, Commander. Our intelligence showed no alliance between these species. They have no treaties, no mutual defense agreements, no political unions. They should not be fighting together. Growled low in his throat, this changed nothing. The coalition fleet was still smaller than his own. Many of their ships were old or poorly armed. They could not stop the all ships advance, standard attack pattern, destroy the enemy and take no prisoners. The battle began. On the bridge of the human flagship, Admiral Peter Cole watched the fleet surge forward. Beside him stood Captain Laura, now serving as liaison with the Allied forces. Screens around them showed tactical data streaming from every ship in the coalition. They are targeting our largest vessels, Peter observed, trying to break our formation quickly. They always do, Laura replied. Intelligence was accurate. They prioritize intimidation. Kill the biggest prey first and the others will flee. Then let us show them why that strategy will not work today. Peter gave the order and the coalition fleet began to move, but they did not charge forward to meet the. Instead, they shifted, reformed, adapted. The larger ships pulled back while smaller, faster vessels darted forward to harass the advance. When they focused on the small ships, the larger vessels struck from unexpected angles. When they turned to face the new threat, the small ships attacked again. Had never seen anything like it. The coalition fought as one being, each ship moving to support the others without hesitation. When a human destroyer was damaged, 3 Allied vessels immediately moved to protect it while it retreated for repairs. When a cruiser lost shields, a medical ship rushed in to evacuate the wounded crew. No one was abandoned, no one was left behind. They are wasting resources, snarled. They should leave the damaged ships and focus on the battle. But as the hours passed, he began to realize his mistake. The coalition lost ships, yes. Hulls were breached and reactors exploded and crews died. But most of the crews survived, rescued by their allies even in the midst of combat. The coalition was losing ships but keeping their people. They were losing both. When a ship was damaged, no one came to help. This was the way. The weak fall, the strong continue. Damaged ships were expected to fight until they were destroyed or to withdraw if they could manage it alone. But human pilots had studied behavior. They knew exactly when a ship would be abandoned by its allies. They targeted those ships mercilessly. 3 hours into the battle had lost 40 ships. The coalition had lost 22, but they had recovered 80% of their crews. They had recovered almost none. This is impossible, muttered. They are prey, they should be fleeing. Instead, they were pushing forward. The coalition had found its rhythm now, each species contributing what it did best. The humans provided leadership and adaptability. They provided knowledge of tactics. The who had survived hunting parties in their forests provided small ship pilots who could navigate through chaos with supernatural skill. Even the pacifists who refused to carry weapons saved lives by rushing into battle zones to rescue the wounded from both sides. On the cruiser, fired her weapons at the ship that had killed her parents 20 years ago. Tears streamed down her face, but her hands were steady. This was what freedom felt like, fighting beside people who valued her life, knowing that if she fell, someone would catch her. She did not fall. The Devourer shuddered as human torpedoes struck its hull, gripped his command chair, and watched his tactical display fill with warning lights. Half his fleet was gone now. The coalition had lost perhaps a third of their number, but their coordination showed no signs of breaking down. Commander, his communications officer reported, the other ships are requesting permission to withdraw. Snapped, we do not retreat, we are. Commander, if we continue this battle, we will be destroyed. Turned and killed the communications officer with a single blow from his clawed hand. The bridge fell silent. We do not retreat, he repeated. Prepare all remaining ships for a final assault. We will break through their lines and destroy the colony. It was the last order he ever gave. The coalition had anticipated this moment, had told them about psychology, about how their commanders would rather die than show weakness. Admiral Cole had positioned his reserve forces precisely for this scenario. When they launched their final charge, they flew directly into a trap. Coalition ships surrounded them on 3 sides and the planet's defense platforms blocked their escape. The Devourer took 17 direct hits in less than a minute. Its shields failed. Its hull cracked open. Its reactor went critical. No ship turned back to rescue the survivors. Died still believing that strength meant fighting alone. He never understood that the coalition's strength came from fighting together. The remaining ships fled, their formation broken, their confidence shattered. They had come to teach the humans about the law of nature. Instead, the humans had taught them something new. Admiral Cole looked at the battlefield, at the wreckage and the bodies, and the rescue ships darting through the debris to save whoever they could find. "Send teams to the wrecks," he ordered. "If any of them survived, bring them aboard." His officers stared at him. "Sir, they are the enemy." "They are wounded beings who need help," Cole replied. "That is all that matters right now." The coalition saved 37 that day, pulled from the wreckage of their own ships and given medical care they had never asked for. Most of them did not understand why. A few of them began to wonder if everything they had been taught was wrong. On the Ambassador Al received news of the disaster, his finest fleet destroyed, his best commander dead, thousands of warriors lost to a collection of prey species that should have been easy targets. He refused to believe it. "It changes nothing," he told his advisors. "We will build more ships, we will train more warriors. The humans won a battle, we will win the war." But even as he spoke, he felt something cold settling in his chest. He did not know it yet, but it was fear. They had never lost a major battle in 300 years. Now they had lost one to humans and their allies, to beings who valued compassion over conquest, to beings who would die for each other. The universe was changing, and they did not know how to change with it. 2 years after the Battle of Meridian, the Dominion was dying, not from any single blow, not from any great military defeat, but from 1,000 small collapses that spread through their empire like disease through a weakened body. Ambassador Al stood before the Supreme Predator's empty throne and tried to explain how it had happened. The throne was empty because the Supreme Predator was dead, killed by his own bodyguards when he suggested negotiating with the humans. 3 other leaders had claimed the position since then. All 3 had been killed within weeks. They did not know how to follow a leader who showed weakness, and every leader eventually showed weakness when the empire was crumbling around them. "The slave worlds are rising," Al reported to the Council of War Commanders who now ruled what remained of the Dominion. 12 major rebellions in the past month alone. We no longer have enough forces to suppress them all. "Then we will make examples," one commander growled. "Destroy a few rebel worlds completely. The others will learn." "We tried that," Al replied. "It made things worse. The rebels know we cannot be everywhere at once. They know we are weak." He hated that word, weak. It tasted like poison in his mouth, but it was true. They were weak now, weaker than they had been in 500 years. The coalition had not tried to conquer them. That was the strangest part. After Meridian, everyone expected the humans to launch an invasion. Instead, they had simply defended their borders and continued rescuing slaves from territory. Every ship that escaped carried more refugees. Every refugee carried more information. Every piece of information made the weaker and the coalition stronger. Doctor documented it all from her research station, watching an empire destroy itself. "Their economy was built on slave labor," she explained to Captain Laura during one of their regular briefings. "Without slaves, they cannot mine their resources, build their ships, or grow their food. They never developed automation because they always had conquered species to do the work. Now those species are either escaping or revolting, and they have no idea how to replace them." "Could they learn?" Laura asked. "In theory, yes, but learning requires admitting you do not know something. It requires asking for help. It requires cooperation between equals," shook her head. "They cannot do any of those things. Their entire culture is built on dominance. Asking for help would be seen as the ultimate weakness. Any who suggested it would be killed by his own people." Laura thought about this for a long moment. "We should offer anyway." Stared at her. "You want to help them after everything they did." "I want to give them the chance to survive," Laura said. "That is what compassion means. It is not just for the people who deserve it, it is for everyone." The peace offer was broadcast across every channel the coalition could reach. Humanitarian aid, economic support, help rebuilding their society on sustainable principles. All they had to do was stop conquering and start cooperating. Al watched the broadcast with cold fury in his eyes. "They mock us," he said. "They pretend to offer friendship while they know we can never accept. This is cruelty disguised as kindness." But not everyone agreed with him. On a border station, a young officer named watched the same broadcast with different eyes. He had been at Meridian. He had seen his commander abandoned by his own fleet. He had been pulled from the wreckage of his ship by human hands that expected nothing in return. He had spent 2 years thinking about that moment. 2 years wondering why beings who had every reason to hate him had chosen to save his life instead. Now he was beginning to understand. Was not alone. Across the Dominion, young who had survived encounters with the Coalition were asking questions their elders could not answer. Why did the humans help their enemies? Why did the Coalition fight so hard to save each other? Why did slaves who escaped to Coalition space seem happier than who ruled empires? These young gathered in secret, sharing their doubts in whispers. They were few, perhaps 10,000 out of billions, but they existed, and that alone would have been impossible a decade ago. Sent a secret message to the Coalition. He did not ask for rescue or for weapons. He asked a simple question. How do you live without domination? How do species exist together without one controlling the others? Captain received the message and spent 3 days composing her reply. You help each other, she wrote. You recognize that every thinking being has value. You understand that strength comes not from standing over others but from standing beside them. It is not easy. It requires trust, which must be earned slowly. It requires humility, which must be learned through failure. But it is possible, and it is better than the alternative. Read the message 100 times. Each time it made more sense. But Al had spies everywhere, even among the doubters. When he learned of the secret communications, he ordered a purge. Thousands of young were executed for the crime of asking questions, escaped only because a human intelligence agent had warned him in time. The purge did not strengthen the Dominion. It weakened it further. Now the young who survived knew that their own people would kill them for thinking different thoughts. Many of them stopped doubting and returned to the old ways, but some of them grew more determined than ever to find a new path. Al watched his empire crumble and could not understand why. He was doing everything right. He was being strong. He was showing no mercy. He was destroying his enemies wherever he found them. But his enemies were everywhere now, and they were not just the Coalition. They were the rebels on 100 worlds. They were the young who no longer believed in dominance. They were the simple facts of economics and logistics that did not care how strong you thought you were. In desperation, Al turned to the one weapon they had always kept in reserve. Deep beneath the Dominion's oldest temples, hidden for thousands of years, lay devices of terrible power. World killers, star burners, weapons so dangerous that even they had been afraid to use them. We will destroy the Coalition, Al declared to his remaining commanders. We will burn their stars and poison their planets. They will learn that they cannot be defeated. Some of the commanders looked uncertain. A few looked afraid. The weapons are unstable, one warned. Using them could destroy us as well. Then we will die with honor, Al replied. Better to burn the galaxy than to live in a universe where compassion triumphs over strength. He gave the orders to activate the ancient weapons. Across the Dominion, priests who had guarded the devices for generations began the rituals of awakening. On the Coalition side, intelligence reports began to arrive. Unusual energy readings from space, ancient facilities being activated, encrypted communications suggesting something terrible. Admiral Cole assembled his commanders and showed them the data. We believe they are preparing to use planet-killing weapons, he said. Not just against us, but possibly against themselves as well. They would rather destroy everything than accept a universe where their philosophy failed. The room fell silent. Then we need to stop them, Laura said finally. How? Asked the Admiral. There is too heavily defended. Laura thought of, and his secret network of doubters. 10,000 who wanted a different future. Not all of them want to die, she said. And not all strength requires weapons. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is offer a hand to someone who is drowning, even if they might drag you down with them. She began to explain her plan, and the Coalition began to prepare for one final mission. Not a mission of war. A mission of rescue. It was called, which meant first blood in their ancient tongue. It was a harsh planet of red deserts and black mountains, where the sky was always the color of rust and the wind carried the smell of sulfur. For 10,000 years, it had been the heart of the Dominion, the source of the philosophy that strength alone mattered and compassion was for the weak. Now it was dying. Captain Laura stood on the bridge of a small diplomatic vessel, watching the planet grow larger on the. Around her, Coalition ships held position at the edge of the system, close enough to respond but far enough to avoid appearing threatening. This was not an invasion. This was an offer. Has gathered his followers at the southern spaceport, reported her communications officer, a young named. Approximately 10,000 have agreed to leave with us, but Al's forces are moving to intercept. How long until the weapons are fully activated? 3 hours, maybe less. Laura nodded and opened a channel to the Coalition fleet. Begin evacuation procedures. All ships with transport capacity move to designated coordinates. Medical vessels prepare for mass casualties. Then she did something that her officers did not expect. Set course for the capital city. I'm going to speak with Al. The bridge fell silent. Captain said carefully, that is suicide. He will kill you the moment you arrive. Perhaps, Laura replied. But if there is any chance of stopping this, I have to try. Compassion means offering help even to those who hate us, even to those who would destroy us. If I am not willing to take that risk, then everything we have fought for means nothing. Her ship descended through the rust-colored clouds, alone and unarmed. Below, the capital city spread across the desert like a wound, its spires built from the bones of conquered species. At the center stood the Temple of Dominion, where Al waited with the controls for the ancient weapons. Laura landed in the temple courtyard and walked up the steps without hesitation. Guards surrounded her immediately, their weapons aimed at her head, but they did not fire. Al wanted to see her first. The ambassador was waiting in the chamber of weapons, standing before a console that pulsed with terrible energy. He had aged badly in the past 2 years. His scales had lost their shine, and his eyes held a darkness that went deeper than anger. You came to gloat, he said, to watch the end of with your own eyes. I came to ask you to stop, Laura replied, to offer you one last chance. Al laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. A chance to become like you, to beg and grovel and pretend that weakness is strength, he gestured at the console behind him. In 2 hours these weapons will fire, coalition worlds will burn, human colonies will be ash, and yes, we'll burn as well, we will all die together. You would rather kill billions of beings, including your own people, than accept help from those you called weak. I would rather die with honor than live with shame. Al stepped closer, his massive form towering over her. You do not understand. You cannot understand. They have ruled this region of space for 10,000 years. We built an empire that conquered species beyond counting. We proved that strength is the only law. And now you come with your compassion and your cooperation and your pathetic alliances, and you say we were wrong, that everything we believed was a lie. It was not all a lie, Laura said quietly. Strength does matter, but you defined it too narrowly. You thought strength meant standing alone. We learned that true strength means standing together. Words, Al snarled. Pretty words from a prey species that got lucky. Then let me show you something that is not words. Laura pulled out a small device and activated it. A holographic display appeared between them, showing the evacuation in progress. Coalition ships were landing at the southern spaceport, loading thousands of refugees onto transports. Human soldiers stood guard alongside and in a dozen other species, protecting the evacuation from Al's loyalists. These are your people, Laura said. Young who want to survive, who want to find a new way. We are risking our ships and our lives to save them, not because they deserve it, not because they can pay us back, but because saving lives is what we do. That is compassion. That is what you called weakness. Al stared at the display. For a long moment he said nothing. Why? He finally asked. We enslaved your allies, we killed your people, we tried to destroy you. Why would you save any of us? Because everyone deserves a chance to be better. Because punishment without hope creates only despair. Because we believe that even can change, given time and support. Laura met his eyes. Because compassion is not about what others deserve. It is about what we choose to give. Something shifted in Al's expression. Just for a moment, Laura saw doubt flicker across his face, doubt in something that might have been regret. Then the moment passed, and his expression hardened again. It is too late, he said. Even if I wanted to stop the weapons, I could not. The activation sequence is beyond my control now. The priests have been preparing for this moment for generations. They will not stop. Then come with us, Laura offered. You and anyone else who wants to live, we will take you to safety. You can help build something new. Al shook his head slowly. I am too old to change. I have done too much to be forgiven. The best I can do now is die with my world. He paused. but perhaps the others do not have to die with me. He walked to a communications panel and activated it. All who wish to leave proceed to the southern spaceport. The coalition will take you. This is not an order. This is a choice. For the first time in your lives, choose for yourselves. Then he turned back to Laura. Go, take whoever will come. And remember even if you remember us only as a warning to others. Laura wanted to argue. She wanted to find some way to save him too, but she could see in his eyes that his decision was final. Some wounds were too deep to heal. I will remember you, she said, not as a monster, as someone who could have been different if things had been different. That is the tragedy of all this. It did not have to end this way. She turned and walked out of the temple. Behind her, Al watched her go with something almost like respect. The evacuation lasted until the last possible moment. Coalition ships loaded refugees until their cargo bays were overflowing, until there was no more room and no more time. Was the last to board, staying at the spaceport to help others until the evacuation order was given. The fleet jumped to safety minutes before the ancient weapons activated. The malfunction was instantaneous and catastrophic. The weapons, unstable after thousands of years, did not fire outward as intended. Instead, they turned their terrible energy inward, and the 3 moons that orbited it were consumed in a blast of light that could be seen across the sector. The Dominion ended not with a conquest, but with a suicide. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy struggled to process what had happened. A species that had terrorized hundreds of worlds for 10,000 years was gone. Their empire was dust. Their philosophy was proven wrong in the most terrible way possible. But something survived. 10,000 lived on coalition worlds now, led by and others who had chosen a different path. They were learning to cooperate, learning to ask for help, learning that compassion was not weakness but strength. It would take generations for them to build a new culture. There would be setbacks and failures and moments of doubt, but they had the chance to try, and that was more than they would have had if the coalition had treated them as they had treated others. Laura stood at the dedication of a memorial built in neutral space. The monument listed the names of every species that had destroyed, carved in stone so the galaxy would never forget. At the bottom, newly added, was the name of themselves. They called human compassion weak, Laura said to the gathered representatives. They believed that mercy was a flaw and kindness was a disease. They were wrong, but we should not celebrate their extinction. We should mourn it, because compassion is not about defeating your enemies. It is about saving them when you can. We could not save but we saved some of them. And perhaps, in time, their descendants will create something beautiful from the ashes of something terrible. She looked up at the stars, where somewhere a small community of reformed was taking its first steps toward a new future. That is what compassion means. Not weakness, never weakness, but the strength to keep reaching out even when others have stopped reaching back, the strength to believe that anyone can change, the strength to hope. The memorial was silent except for the wind, which carried the names of the lost across the void. And somewhere in the darkness, the last of the looked up at the same stars and began to learn what it meant to be free.